Imagine you've got customers coming in through your doors. You're excited. They're buying stuff from you and you expect them to come back because they're very happy, but they don't. Why? Because your customer service is lousy. In this day and age, you would think that people would change the way they treat their customers. But today, we're not going to be talking about customer service. We're talking about something infinitely more important, I believe, which is humans working in a new type of environment. You see, gone are the days where you just turn up to work, do your assembly line thing, and then you're off home. Well, those days were gone a long time ago. But to neglect the worker, to neglect your people now is extraordinarily expensive. That's me talking to people who are employers. Let's now address the issue with young people who are trying to enter the workplace. One of the biggest challenges straight away is confusion. What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be talking to? How am I supposed to behave? But what makes it exponentially worse or exponentially more difficult is if you're somebody who's neurodivergent. I didn't even know that word until maybe not even a year ago. So in this episode of the Young Leaders Nexus podcast, I am going to be talking to someone who's an expert in this area, and we're going to unravel the mystique, the mystery, and the myths. I like all those M's. I'm going to unravel all of that. We are going to unravel all of that pertaining to the workplace for young people. Welcome, Sam. Sam is a expert communicator, somebody who I met not long ago. And when I actually met, I'll be honest with you, naively thought, neurodivergent, what's this? Is this some kind of woke stuff or something? Actually, no, she didn't need to convince me because I discovered only, I don't know, 6 weeks ago that I'm ADHD or I've had ADHD all my life. And then I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm in my 50s and so much of my life, which was inexplicable to me, that left me in a really horrible place, could have been described and helped by someone like Sam. So forget about me. Today, it's about you, the listener. Welcome, Sam, to the podcast. Tell us a bit more about yourself beyond what I've just said.
Well, hello, Haroon. Thank you so much for having me. I discovered that I was neurodivergent when I was 35. I'm 51 now. And it was kind of by accident, actually. And I didn't get a diagnosis until 2 years ago. But I knew I didn't really need the formal diagnosis because I'd done so much research that it was an obvious thing, but very validating. Absolutely amazing. I cried for 2 hours, not because I was unhappy, because I was like, yes, I knew it. It was wonderful. And all that time from the age of 35, I have felt like I have been shouting into the void because I didn't want other people to have the same kind of working experience that I had had through the years, where everything had just been, it seemed 50 times harder than everyone else. I was always on the back foot. I was always the last to know anything or the last to pick up anything. And I was really not great at reading between the lines. I struggled with woolly instructions. I just wanted people to say what they mean and mean what they say. And I just thought, why does this have to be so difficult? I'm pretty sure everybody wants clearer communication. No one has ever said to me, I want even more woolly instructions, please, Haroon. It just, those words don't come out of people's mouths. Everybody wants it to be clearer and more honest. So that's what started me on this whole, I don't want to say campaign, that sounds a bit political. It's not at all. But this passion of mine to help organisations support their neurodivergent staff and to support neurodivergent staff in their jobs so they can thrive. So that's me.
Thank you so much. It's something that neurodiversity is something that a lot of people have no idea of the terminology. In this day and age, just like for my own self as well, someone who's not heard of it can be very confusing and misleading. So can you explain what neurodiversity actually means and where does ADHD or autism and all that kind of stuff fit in?
So neurodiversity is an umbrella term. It was actually coined by a lady called Judy Singer. It was to describe the panoply of different brains that we have. And one might use words like neurodiverse to describe a room full of people, because you'll have a mixture of neurodivergent people who are diverging from what is called neurotypical. This all comes back to the DSM-5, which is a diagnostic manual where a bunch of people in white coats decided this over here, this is normal, and that over there isn't normal. So we'll give it a label. And that's how all this stuff comes about anyway. But that's how the terms have arrived with us. So an individual would be described as neurodivergent. You wouldn't describe an individual as neurodiverse. That's a room full of people. That's everybody. It's because it's actually quite difficult to pinpoint one person's neurodiversity compared to another's because, and it sounds like a cliche, but we are so very different from each other. You might have people like myself. I'm autistic and I have ADHD. I'm also dyspraxic and dyslexic, and I have dysgraphia as well. I'm a highly sensitive person, sensory processing disorder, hate that word, and I have synesthesia as well. So lots of lovely big words there, words that some people have never heard of. Pathological demand avoidance, which was in the DSM-5 for a while, and now they've taken it out. That doesn't mean it's gone away. It's just they've decided they're not going to include it anymore. What?
So just to clarify, the DSM-5 is a diagnostic book for created by the psychiatrist, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a British version or a WHO version, a World Health Authority version as well. Yeah, it's like the Bible for, right, let's figure out what's wrong with you as they leaf through the pages.
Are neurodivergents, are they sick?
Oh, that is a good question. So some people might be, and that's only in terms of a lot of neurodivergent people have co-occurring conditions as well. There's stuff that comes along for the ride. And you can say in terms of percentage, some statements that are true. So, for example, there are lots of individuals who have Down syndrome who will have a high percentage opportunity rather than risk, I like to say, of also being autistic. Whereas you can't flip that and say that of autistic people, they have a high percentage risk of Downs. You've got, statistics and damn lies and all that kind of stuff. You've got to read them correctly. But you will have individuals who will have other co-occurring conditions, which will mean that they need support from their doctor, possibly medication or perhaps physiotherapy. Maybe they have Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder. Oh gosh, there's so many things that come along for the ride. Gastrointestinal problems, eating disorders. And yet you can have someone who's autistic who has none of those. And we like to put people in a box, don't we, Haroon? So we can work out who am I talking to? Who's in front of me? That way, I've got the measure of you and I know how to talk to you. And that all comes back to caveman times where we're sizing up this person in front of us. Are you a threat? Are you a friend? Do I need to run away from you or fight you? And we've still got that in our lizard brain. So we're always trying to put people into a nice box where we can work out what you are and how we'll interact with each other. Unfortunately, with neurodiversity and neurodivergence, there aren't kind of nice big boxes to put people in. If you've got 1,000 people in a room, you've got 1,000 boxes.
So it's a spectrum and a combination. It's a matrix, in essence.
Totally. Yeah. It's like if you put your hand into a bag of multicolored marbles, we're all going to come out with a different handful, right?
As somebody who's been in some form of business since the age of 12, which is now, 42 years, with ADHD, not realizing I had that until recently, I was shocked to discover that about 30% of entrepreneurs, I'm talking about successful entrepreneurs, I don't include myself in it, have got ADHD. Can something like ADHD or being a neurodivergent, can that be a superpower?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that word because I think it sort of puts people on a pedestal and there's an expectation that you're going to be some amazing super being or something. I'm not sure that's fair because most people are just people with strengths and weaknesses like everybody else. And so I might have attributes which makes me fantastic at problem solving and generating ideas because that's the way my brain works, but that doesn't mean I'm a superhuman or I have a superpower. It just means I'm good at those things. I might not be good at other things. I'm really not great at really repetitive tasks. Ugh, like spreadsheet hell, right? I'm not good at that stuff. Some people are amazing at that stuff. The detail, the perfection that they, they're so thorough, and that's their jam. That's what they're really good at. What I'm not. So we're not always good at one thing, and therefore have a superpower. But I think the number's probably higher, to answer your question about ADHD and entrepreneurs. But the very fact that you said that you'd been doing things since you were 12, and I am not a diagnostician, let's make that perfectly clear. The fact that you said that you've been doing entrepreneurial activity since the age of 12 is a big old green flag for ADHD.
I'm not 100% sure I wanted to do it. I just did it. It's interesting having this conversation with yourself because the only person I can relate this to is to my own experience. As an example, you said that it's not a superpower. So you don't like that label. And I get that. Now, wait for this. Imagine being the skinniest kid in a Kung Fu class and the smallest one and getting beaten up. This isn't Kung Fu, of course, and then becoming the best fighter in the whole club, even though everyone's bigger than you, etc., or one of the best, and then becoming British champion. Now, when I went into the speaking field, I would not even mention that I was a black belt or black sash in Kung Fu. I wouldn't even, olden days, I wouldn't even mention that I was the British kickboxing champion. It was like, meh, it's a big deal. But what really affected me massively was when I used to sell medical equipment. And the last company I worked for, and I was going through a divorce at the time, I was the number one salesperson there selling ENT equipment. Now, we're talking about, when I say number one, if our monthly target was 100%, most of my colleagues were in their 80% and 90s, and top one was mid 90. I was anything between 130 to 160%.
Mm.
And I kept having clashes with the company because my job was go and make the sale. I am so not a pushy salesperson. I'm all about relationships. Company's policy was, Haroon, we've got 3,000 products. Why aren't you predicting or forecasting all the orders we're going to get in the next month across over 100 hospital admin, spreadsheets, forecasting? How the hell am I supposed to know what they're going to order unless it's a big order, because the smallest product was £5, the biggest one was 5,000. And they gave me hell to the point.
Was your crystal ball broken?
Well, this is it. So, well, definitely they broke my crystal balls by the end of it. So they lost. I actually walked away from that company for a variety of reasons, and they lost their top person who actually, and even in my previous company, I grew a territory from 100,000 to 750,000. And they changed their system. The first company, great company, they changed their system to adapt to my way of selling.
Mm-hmm.
And my last company gave me so much headache because of the details that I ended up leaving. So my question to you is, am I unique in this with someone with that kind of condition, ADHD, very focused, doing what I'm told, as in, you hired me for this? Okay, I'll do it. Am I the only one, or are there other people out there like me?
Oh, lots of people out there like you. Lots of people. There's if people have been job hopping, let's call it, between 18 months to 2 years cyclically, there's a very good chance it's because they're not challenged enough at work. And I don't mean that they're loaded up with more work. I mean that they're not inspired, excited, that kind of challenge enough by the job. Frequently, when I would be in a job, they'd say, oh, you need to be in the job for at least 2 years before we'd consider you for promotion. I'd already got the job down in 6 months, and now I'm okay. I'm not saying I need to be promoted, but I'm going to have to go and do something else because I'm now bored to tears. I've done everything I can to improve the job that I'm in within the limits that I've been set, and now I'm just going through the motions, so I've lost interest. And in the end, I just thought, I've moved so many times in organizations. This is before portfolio careers were a thing, right? And I just thought, I just need to move at my pace. And that's how come I ended up leaving employment and starting up on my own. And that was 2015 when I went full time. I've been doing a side hustle since 2008.
This then creates a big concern if you're an employer. So at the Young Leaders Nexus, we're all about helping create the platform. I don't like the word empowerment. Empowerment means I'm giving them something, but creating the platform for young people to be absolutely brilliant and geniuses at what they're at.
Yeah, maybe it's enabling rather than empowerment.
Yeah, exactly. It's because we're already gifted. And so herein lies the problem. Looking at an employer's perspective is your people, and we'll talk about age groups in a bit, your people that you're working for you, they're not feeling valued. There's a lot of people think, employers think, feeling valued means, oh, we'll give them a gym membership, and what will we do? We'll give them perhaps a bit more pay. But actually, I don't know about yourself. Nobody could motivate me with money and say, Haroon, you'll make more. I just, in my days of selling medical equipment, I just wanted to be number one.
Mm.
That's all. I just wanted to be a top guy. Money was a byproduct. But the challenge comes in when somebody comes to you and has those abilities like you've got and not being challenged. If you're not being valued, you're basically saying you're not recognizing me.
Yeah, for sure. And there would be so many mixed messages, as there often are in corporate, because there's lots and lots of managers,
Mm.
too many managers probably in a lot of organizations, and they inherit bad habits from previous managers because frequently there's no adequate training.
Mm.
People are supposed to train on the job
Mm.
when they get into a managerial position, but it just doesn't work. If we want to break that sort of generational bad habit thing, then we're going to need to train the managers before they go into that position so that they don't pick up all the bad habits.
Mm.
And so, there was one year, I think we used to have these awards that were tied to our values. And I think I'd won 5 awards in the year, which was pretty epic. Most people didn't win that many in a year, but overachiever as always, a bit like you, Haroon. And at my performance appraisal, they were like, "Well, it's been a very ordinary year," and I'm like, "Has it though?" Because I've won these 5 awards, which is all about being exceptional in these areas. So has it been a very ordinary year? Because I'm not sure that's true. And all these mixed messages all the time. Yes, but you say yes to everything, Sam. You can't possibly be delivering on everything. I'm like, I haven't missed a deadline yet. But the perception, that awful word, the perception is that you say yes to everything. So people measure you by their own inadequacies.
Yes.
And they assume, because they wouldn't be able to deliver everything, that
Mm.
you can't deliver everything.
100%.
And I just thought, well, I can't fight perception.
No, you can't. You can't. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Young Leaders Nexus podcast with myself, Haroon Rabbani, and our amazing guest, Sam Warner. We're talking about neurodiversity and at this moment talking about ADHD. Let's hone in on this one because there's a lot of stereotypes. The media often portrays ADHD in a specific way. What are some of the misconceptions, the myths around ADHD in particular?
Well, the misconceptions are unfortunately perpetuated on platforms like TikTok, and that there isn't one easy peasy set of 5 characteristics that equals ADHD. It is ADHD, as much as autism, is of a spectrum, but it's very 3-dimensional. I want you to imagine that there is a globe rather than a flat circle or a line. It's not very linear. And in that globe, reaching out from the middle, there might be different characteristics that people have. And that could be something like you find it very difficult to initiate tasks. You find it difficult to prioritize. You might find it challenging to take on instructions verbally. You need them written down for you. You might find it very difficult to get to anywhere on time. You're either like massively early or always late. Those kind of things. Not everybody experiences them to the same extent. So when I'm talking about that globe, if you draw a line out to the edge where it's perhaps a 0 in the middle of the globe and a 10 on the edge of the globe, you can start to see the shape, the spiky profile, the shape of what your neurodivergency looks like, which will be very different if you put that next to, like yours next to mine, for example. Will have more challenges in different areas. And the reason why for many people ADHD can be disabling is because there are some people who experience those challenges, and that's right up to a 9 or a 10. Many people with ADHD, for example, experience something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is a really challenging aspect of our brains. And it can lead on to days, weeks, and months of rumination, which is that overthinking about what happened, and you want to put it right. You want to have that conversation again with someone and fix it and wish you'd said this. It's not just that passing thought of, oh, should have said this. Lots of us have that. It's the ongoing week by week, month by month. Sometimes it will come in as an intrusive thought when you're already feeling down about something else. And you can become extra sensitive to the perception, that horrible word again, of being rejected. And that could just be we've felt that perception because of how we're feeling today. It's nothing to do with the other person. Or it could be because that other person didn't choose their words very well. So that's an example of how people might experience something that's very debilitating. Another one I mentioned, pathological demand avoidance. And that's not just peculiar to autistic people. And that's where you really want to do something, but there's a part of your brain that just flipping well won't let you. I'll give you an example in case that's not clear. When I was a kid, my parents, my mum in particular, was really house proud. And I knew that if I said to myself, do you know what, I'm going to go and get the Hoover and hoover the lounge the way my mum wants me to hoover it, not just a it's done, but move all the chairs, the proper hoover, and she'll be so chuffed that I did it without her asking. As I walked towards the hoover, my mum saw me and said, oh, could you hoover the lounge? Well, now I can't because you've asked me to do it. Instant shutter. Doesn't make any sense when you say it out loud, but that's exactly what my brain did. Well, I was going to do it, but now I can't, because the whole point was I was going to do it without you asking, and now that's completely messed up because you've asked me to.
Oh my God, I love this. So in essence, what you're saying is, in some respects, is there's a part of us wants to be left to our own devices to just get on with things. And the
Yeah, we want to
moment someone,
choose. Yeah.
and the moment someone commands or demands, it becomes like, oh, okay, I ain't gonna do it now then. It might be seen as being stubborn by some, but I think this is a big issue though. It's way bigger than people realize. And it goes back to what I said about earlier on about empowering young people. I'm not looking to empower young people with our organization. I'm looking to create the space for them to do what they're naturally good at. They get guidance, they get the platform to go and get on with things. And this is the thing that someone can hear you who's neurotypical, basically, is what you call the so-called normal person. I'm not sure who's normal, and if I want to be normal, by the way. And so if we create the space, this is not the army. Most of the world doesn't work, for the military. If we create the space for someone to just do what they're naturally good at, obviously with guidance, then they will shine way more.
Oh, for sure. And school isn't set up for that.
No.
Unfortunately, mainstream school I'm talking about, not these other fabulous Montessori type schools, which all of our schools should be. The modern state school, let's call it that, or academy, or whatever they're called now, they're very much following a curriculum that was devised in the 1950s to create good little worker robots that either went into an office or went into manufacturing and did as they're told. Sit down, shut up, do as you're told. Don't think for yourself. That's not what we want. Don't be critical thinkers. Don't be creative. Just do what you're told. Because of that, people who always think for themselves just can't thrive in that environment. I was never able to absorb stuff and parrot it back unless there was context. Tell me how I might use a quadratic equation. Give me a for instance. What job am I doing? What problem is it solving? I can't just do a quadratic equation because you say, here it is, and you've got to do it to pass the exam. But what is it? What's it for?
How relevant.
How am I going to use it? Yeah, it's just crazy. Whereas, if you get some Montessori school where they say, okay, we're gonna look at engineering and architecture today, and then you realise all the different subjects that come into engineering and architecture, from chemistry, metallurgy, quantity surveying, So you're working out all your areas of things. How many bricks are you going to need to build this? How big is a brick? How many bricks do you need? All of that working out. That's all your maths and your physics and that's all of the stuff all in together, rather than being taught individually as separate subjects. Because there are very few jobs out there which are just one subject, unless perhaps you're a lecturer in that field, maybe.
Absolutely. You stay in school all your life. So let's say a young person, we're talking about young adults, all the way through to, let's call it 30, they start seeing signs and symptoms which potentially will put them into one of the neurodivergent matrix. What can they do, or how can they better their lives? Or what are several things they can potentially do to unlock their true gift and talent?
Well, the first thing I would say is work on becoming self-aware. Personal development will literally be the key to your success. Again, it's not something that schools might encourage, so I'm going to encourage you to seek out personal development opportunities. That might be neuro-linguistic programming, also known as NLP. It might be any number of books that are out there to help you understand yourself. There's lots and lots of books now relating to neurodivergency, way more than there ever has been before. Some of the personal stories are just as valid as these sort of more technical books, because being able to see yourself in someone else makes you feel less lonely, less isolated, less weird. And that's important. That sense of belonging is really important to human beings. I'd suggest that people read books like The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox Cabane, which is one of my favourite books. And it teaches you that people aren't born as charismatic individuals. It's a learned skill, just like everything else. If you're finding that people don't warm to you, it's very difficult for you to build friendships and relationships with people. Perhaps people kind of go, oh no, Sam's here, rather than, oh, brilliant, Sam's here. Then perhaps building your charisma skills might help. Building your listening skills, learning to take turns in conversations, learning to be interested in other people, even if that's not your natural state. I could quite happily have been a hermit, right? Quite happily. But I've taught myself to enjoy the company of people when I choose to do that.
It's important, I think, from my own perspective, from my own experience, that is, that the self-awareness makes a big difference. Keep in mind, I've only been self-aware of this in the last 4 or 6 weeks, something like that. And I have to say there was a grieving period. I'm not sure if I'm through it, because I look back at my life and I don't want to talk about it because it gets me choked up, as in a positive and negative way, because so many things, so many incidences could have been prevented with other people had I realized, and certainly they realized. So, it can be heartbreaking. So self-awareness is number one. Number two is to reach out, like I am to you. I mean, even in this interview, it's actually very therapeutic, very cathartic for me. So, so thank you, Sam, for that. So I would definitely say, yes, there is no single person on the planet who's normal. I've been a therapist for a long time as well. I can tell you, everybody has got crap going on in their life. Everybody. And there are plenty of people who are, including me, who pretend their way through life that they're normal. No such thing. You know what I'm finding very useful? It's just letting people know, by the way, I realize I do have ADHD. I've not been fully diagnosed, but I've got all the symptoms by the looks of it, which explains, even in this conversation, we're doing an audio recording, but we've got a camera. You can see I keep looking in different directions. And I used to think, oh my God, why don't you just keep eye contact? What's wrong with you? But I now realize, actually, it's okay. That's how I process my information. Let's talk to teachers and professors and lecturers, people who are there. I'm not talking about SEN schools because they're highly trained, but I'm talking about non-SEN state schools. How can they help young people who, by the way, a lot of them who got behavioral issues are super, super intelligent? I know so because I've spoken to hundreds of thousands of young people, of which some of them are so brilliant, but their behavior's crazy. So how can teachers become better guardians for such young people with neurodivergency?
So the phrase that you used is the key. The phrase you used was behavioural issues. Compared to what? Because I'm using in the broad term of everybody in that space who are observing children in classes and have decided what appropriate behaviour is in a class. Again, that's some sort of arbitrary list of we expect you to behave like X, Y, and Z. Sit down, shut up, do as you're told. And unfortunately, when your brain is going at 900 miles an hour all the time and the teacher's just not engaging you, some other stuff's going to happen. So if you're able to teach the curriculum in more of a Montessori style, where you can actually bring in props to the classroom, maybe you could get your ADHD kids or people who look like they might be to sit on the edges of the room rather than in the middle. And if they need to get up and walk around, they can without disturbing everybody, because they might need to move their body whilst they're listening, you know? Or maybe let them fiddle with some kind of quiet, squishy things, or even a big lump of blue tack. That's what I give to people in my training rooms. Have a lump of blue tack, play with that. And then they can put it into any shape they like. And the funniest things happen. I'll do that with a mixed room of individuals, so neurodiverse. And I'll say, I've put a lump of blue tack in front of each and every one of you to play with whilst you're listening. Oh, what's that for? I won't need that. Half an hour in, every single person in the room is playing with the blue tack. Every single one. Because we quite like fiddling with things. It helps us to concentrate. It helps us to listen. It keeps our mind on the game. So why wouldn't we let children also do that in the classroom?
It befuddles my mind. It really does when we ask kids, I want to talk about when I say kids, I mean young children and certainly young adults, teenagers, to sit in one place and just pay attention and look you straight in the eye. I mean, just even thinking about my eye movements are all over the shop. Just thinking that, I mean, why do we treat, and this is a rhetorical question, why do we treat young people as if they're caged animals and they're just going to do what they're told? Because we are expecting them to pick up information that we have, the level of knowledge and experience we have, and to run with that, when in reality, how good's our life going? How well's our life going?
Yeah.
We really want to pass that on, or do we want to create the space for them to be way more free, way more liberated? So
So there was a thing that we almost managed to push through Parliament, but because they've called a general election early, unfortunately that's stopped now, which is a big blow. And that was to get all schools to test age 5 at reception, every single student. Because if you did it at age 5 and then streamed the children into the right room to be taught differently, there are about a third of every average classroom who do thrive in the here's the information, regurgitate the information onto the exam paper, A star, off you go. The numbers now, number 1 or whatever it is you get when you get the top mark. There are children who can do that. Can they apply what they've learned? Probably not, but that's the way school is at the moment. But the other groups of kids, the rest, the 2/3 that aren't thriving in that space, there's an opportunity to teach them differently. The American way of schooling, where you have a middle school and a high school, I think has real potential for us. Because if you take kids up to the age of 14 and then put them in a new school at the point where they're turning 15, 16, 17, 18, they could go into a vocational school at that point. Now, for some kids, that might be medicine, because they're desperate to get into medicine in whatever field floats their boat. Why wouldn't you start them that early down that track? Why do they need to learn Latin or something else, or whatever it is the school's decided is a mandatory subject, or history or whatever? Maybe they just want to concentrate on biology and the things you need for doing medicine. Or maybe actually academia is a nightmare for that individual child, and they want to become a plasterer, for example. Now, I've never met a poor plasterer. I've never met a poor plumber. There seems to be this assumption that the practical arts, let's call them, are somehow less than. But actually, they're just a different job. They're a different employment altogether. The schools are supposed to be there to make the children work ready. That's its purpose, right? Because it doesn't really prepare them for life, let's face it. It doesn't teach them how to iron a shirt or anything like that.
You save money.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, regurgitate this stuff on a piece of paper and we'll give you a mark and off you go. Go to university, please, because that makes us look really good. Even though that might not be the right thing for you.
So a lot of people in the past complained, employers in particular, complained about millennials. We have a new generation coming through. In the UK, we call it Gen Z, by the way. My American friends, I'm being nice to you, that's called Gen Z to you guys. But anyway, let's talk about Gen Z. What do we need to be aware of if you're an employer about the new generation?
I think the number one thing is that Gen Z or Gen Z are not going to be as tolerant as previous generations have been. I think Generation X, which is the one before millennials, was the toughest, and we've taken a lot of things and swallowed it down and been good little workers. And then when we get to like age 35, 40, we resist and have a midlife crisis, as they call it, but we actually wake up and end up doing what we really want to do. But for the younger generations now, they're already at the place that we get to when we're in our 30s and 40s. They're there when they're 18. They're like, I'm not going to do something that doesn't feed my lifestyle. I'm more likely to want a portfolio career. So I might want to work for an organization for 3 days a week, a different organization for 2 days a week, and I might choose to do some ad hoc stuff on the weekend. What that means is if I have to take holiday, it's less impact on the business because I'm only leaving for 3 days of the week or 2 days of the week. If I lose one of those jobs, I don't lose my home because I haven't lost all of my work. I haven't put all of my eggs into one basket. I don't really have to subscribe to the politics because I'm not there for a full-on career all the way to the top. I'm there to do some work, to be paid, so I can go on holiday and do things with my friends and have the lifestyle that I want. It's a different way of living. And there's even, so the Generation X was probably the drunkest generation. And I'm reflecting on it. Is it because we were numbing ourselves because we didn't like our lives? Because when we look at Generation Z or Z, they are less into alcohol than any other generation before. They don't want to numb themselves from life. They want to grasp life with both hands and live it, enjoy it, squeeze every drop out of it. It's a completely different generation, and I'm not sure most employers are ready.
So what will happen if they are not ready and they don't address this?
The minority of organisations who are ready are going to mop up the biggest talent, no doubt about that, because they'll know how to attract and look after the new people.
Yeah.
And the people who are not forward thinking and ready are going to miss out. They're going to find it hard to bring on apprentices, hard to bring on new talent.
And that's a big issue. I do speak to employers, and that's a very, very big issue that they're not able to talk to these people. And we don't even need to bring in culture because that's a different topic altogether. Because in the UK, whether you like it or not, we are a society of many cultures. Even if you look at, say, for example, let's just say it's only Anglo-Saxon people living in the UK. We still have a multicultural society, multi-ethnic or not necessarily ethnic, but even the religious. So there's a danger that the UK economy is going to struggle big time across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And what will happen when Gen X have to retire and the millennials are coming towards retirement? So within 10, 20 years, this country is going to struggle paying your pensions, mate, because whoever's working is the one who pays your pension.
Well, they'll just push the pension age out to 70, ultimately. There are lots of people already working well into their 70s because they have to, because the pension they've got now isn't enough to live on. So we're going to be seeing people working later and later. And that does have an impact on the incoming workforce coming out of school, because the jobs are not being made available because people are staying in the jobs for longer.
If you were an employer, Sam, and you had a big organization, let's just say, I don't know, 500 employees, obviously there's those who are what are, and I hate pigeonholing, but for the purpose of this conversation, there's the neurotypicals, which will be a significant portion, and then there'll be neurodivergent people, which is extremely diverse, as you pointed out. So, from the barely noticeable to blatantly, everyone's going to be aware of it. If you're an employer, what's 3 things you would do to make sure that your company thrives in context of your employees?
Well, that's a great question. So we have to remember, statistically, we are looking at 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. So it's 20% of your workforce. It's not to be sniffed at. The 3 things I would do is I would make sure my recruitment pipeline serves all kinds of brains, right from the advert, the job description, the application process, through to the interview, and then if they get the job, the induction. It's a long pipeline, but if you get it right, you'll set people up for success and they'll want to stay, and they'll tell all their mates about how brilliant it is to work here. That's one thing. The second thing is I'd make sure that there was a neurodiversity policy as part of the diversity, equity and inclusion piece, corporate social responsibility. They'll have one for gender, they'll have one for race, they'll have one for LGBTQIA, that they'll have policies for those aspects of diversity, equity and inclusion, and they need one for neurodiversity. And inside it will be number 3, which is your list of reasonable adjustments, accommodations and adaptations. And it needs to be published somewhere that people can see it. Because if I'm looking at an organization and I'm thinking, oh, right, well, I'm going to apply for a job here, am I? I'm going to put all that effort in to apply for a job, and it's considerable effort to apply for any job. How do I know this organization is a safe place for me to disclose my neurodiversity? How do I know that I can walk into that interview room having already asked for the questions in advance? I know a lot about what the room is like, who am I going to meet, what the session's going to be like, is there going to be a test, how long will I be there, is there any parking there, do I have to go through security, is there a dress code, do I need to bring my laptop? All the fantastic joining instructions that are so rarely given. If I know that this organisation is going to have a conversation with me about reasonable adjustments so I can thrive at work, I'm definitely going to feel like I want to put the effort in to apply to work there. Definitely. And if they're going to give the effort to support me, I'm going to be loyal. I'm going to work over and above. I'm going to bend over backwards to be my very best self at this place because they respect me. They value me. Like you say, Haroon, it's not about the money. Yes, we need to pay our bills, but if I don't feel valued and respected, forget it.
Yeah, exactly. We can actually go and starve ourselves and we'll be okay with that rather than be at a place which is not even, not in some respects, not even recognizing who we are for as we are. So let's explore finally the big area that you help in particular. You talk to businesses and so on. What about people who are past 30 years of age? So you've hit 30, and like myself, and I'm not an employee, but let's say you're past 30 and you discover, oh my goodness, I've got ADHD or I've got some form of dyspraxia or some other condition or issue. How do they navigate the workplace?
Well, it comes back to that self-awareness piece. There's some work to be done on yourself to understand, okay, so what do I find easy? What do I find difficult? Realistically, what could I ask for help for? Most things that are reasonable adjustments are actually free, don't cost anybody anything. It's an allowance to say that you can do this or that. For example, wearing headphones in an open plan office. Right? You bring your own headphones, you put them on your head, it costs the company nothing. You make sure it's communicated throughout the team that that's what this individual is going to do when they need to concentrate on a piece of work. Or they might need to wear them all day. But they're not sitting there listening to loud music all day. They're just reducing the overwhelm so they can work. I've got a great analogy for you, right? let's pretend you're not wearing glasses, Haroon, and you don't need glasses. Perfect vision. And you and I are sitting next to each other at work doing exactly the same job. We're paid the same. Only I do wear glasses. I've got a very high prescription because I'm very short-sighted. If I take my glasses off, I am now at a disadvantage because I can't see very well. It's going to take me a lot longer to do my job in the same way that you do. However, we have these things called glasses, eyeglasses for the American friends. And I'm going to put them on and they correct my vision so now I can see just the same as you can. Now I can do my job the same as you can. Have I disadvantaged you in any way because I now wear glasses and I can do my job? No. Have I gained an unfair advantage of anybody because I'm wearing my glasses to do my job? No. That's what a reasonable adjustment is. There's this myth that people have reasonable adjustments and suddenly they have all this unfair advantage over everyone else. And it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, when all people operate from fear, of course, they're going to see, instead of saying, hey, we're just giving them the similar platform that we're on with slight adjustments, but instead of saying that, they'll be thinking, oh my God, they've got an advantage over us, and this positive discrimination is so bad for you, and all kind of nonsense. It reminds me, actually, it's interesting because I'm sure if you're an employer, for example, one of the issues I have is when I'm focused and I've got my creativity going, my God, I don't like being disturbed. It's like, just don't even knock on my door. It's like that. And then there's other times when I'm on the train, I've written books while I'm on the train because I need that noise in the background, but just no direct noise to me, not talking to me. I can do that. So it varies from time to time, situation to situation. However, when I'm focused, when I used to work for somebody, I'd achieve in a couple of hours what people would take a couple of days to achieve.
Yep.
And I'm just left to get on with it. So this then addresses or questions the whole 9 to 5 thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I used to work for people, it's like, why am I, and this is across all the jobs I did, why am I doing 8 hours of work where I actually work for 2 hours and playing around with elastic bands for 6 hours? Or when I used to sell medical equipment, I'd achieve my monthly targets sometimes with one meeting, which takes 5 minutes, by the way.
Imagine a world where you're paid for your output, not paid for bums on seats hours.
Yeah.
Now, some people will go, oh, no, that wouldn't work because people would rush their job so that they could just go and do something else and the quality would go down. Well, no, obviously, you're going to have quality control. And as long as the individual can turn in whatever work it is to the agreed level of quality, then you're golden. If it takes somebody 8 hours to do it because actually they need the time to actually go through it, that doesn't mean they're less than either. It just means they take longer to do the same job. Full stop. In the same way, when we're examining children and we say you've got 2 hours to do an exam, if you gave one of those children 4 hours to do the same exam, they may well score higher. But because you've time boxed it to 2 hours, and now I'm panicking about can I get all the stuff out of my head in time, I'm probably going to score lower because I don't do well under time pressure. However, I do amazingly well against a deadline. Big difference.
Yeah.
And like interviews, they say that, oh, we want to see how you work under pressure. An interview isn't a pressured environment. It's a stressful environment.
Yeah.
Big difference.
It's interesting because it should be a conversation. Because I used to be a former recruiter, I've done a few things. It was always a conversation. In fact, when I used to go for job interviews, I'd be interviewing them. Like, well, why should I work for you?
Absolutely.
If I'm giving half of my waking hours every day, 5 days a week to you, what's so special about you?
Absolutely. I've got a list of 18 questions I give to individuals to ask at their interview.
Right.
Because, quite often they'll say, have you got any questions for us kind of thing at the end of the interview? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. So as we come to a close, this has been, you realize we could talk for hours, of course. Are there any quick fire tips you can give to young aspiring leaders or their employers to take into consideration, to maybe shift their paradigm and not think that there's something wrong with them, but actually potentially, because I did ask you, is it a superpower? But I think, understanding how your brain is working to some degree, I think it is a superpower actually, if you can make a big difference to someone's lives because you've got ADHD or autism, whatever. So
Hmm.
are there any quick fire tips you want to share from your experience that I think, you know what, consider this, this, and this to help your life better beyond beyond what we've already talked about?
Yeah, so the biggest one is assumptions. Throw them away. Absolutely throw them away. You know nothing about the person in front of you until you talk to them and ask them questions. And I don't mean interrogate, I mean have a conversation, just like you said. Also, everything is a movable feast. Life changes, circumstances change. So even though you might have agreed something with someone, perhaps about a reasonable adjustment, for example, why not trial it for a period, say a month, and then revisit and go, so how did that work? Did it help everybody? Did it help the business? Did it help the individual? Because it doesn't have to be cast in stone. Or it could be that you've done the trial, you've implemented it, it's working really well, then the circumstances have changed for that individual. So let's have another conversation about how we can change that again if that's required. It's that willingness to be adaptable yourself as a leader, to make sure that your team is in the best shape it can be in so it can be productive and thrive and all that kind of stuff. Surely it's like a coach of a football squad. You want your team to be fighting fit and on their A game all the time, right? Well, think like that. Think that you can help your team to be in that kind of shape, and then you'll look great as a leader
Absolutely.
because everyone's winning.
Absolutely. And for anyone who might be interested in working with you, what is it that you specifically do? Who is it that you do it for? And how can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so I do two main things. I work with organizations who want to do this stuff better, whether it's their recruitment process or maybe their neurodiversity policy, or maybe it's just information and awareness for their organization on the subject. So that's one sort of way to access my knowledge. And the other is that I will work with individuals who are working to help them thrive at work. And that might be just helping them to understand how to play the neurotypical game, because that's a very useful thing to do if you need to do it to get on. And in terms of getting in touch with me, really, it's just either swing by my website, which is getyourmessageacross.com with hyphens in between, or you can get hold of me on LinkedIn. I'm Sam Warner on LinkedIn, not one of the Warner brothers. So if you Google me, you might get a black and white picture of a bloke. I'm not one of the Warner brothers. I've got red hair, I've got cat eye glasses, and yeah, I'm not easy to miss.
Wonderful. So just to summarize, you are a guide, an advisor, a consultant, and actually, you haven't said it, a professional speaker as well.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, I do that too.
thank you. This has been such an enlightening interview. Certainly for me, I really hope it is the same for others. And I truly hope people don't keep this information a secret to themselves, that they share it with two, three other people that they think, maybe this person can gain. And if you're an employer, you need to hear this interview. You really do. Is there any final question I should have asked, maybe, and I haven't?
Maybe it was something like, what did you talk about in your TEDx?
What did you talk about in your TEDx? Because you're a TEDx speaker as well.
I am, yes. So I spoke about the new rules of engagement, and that's all about communication in the workplace. Most of the time, when I go into work with organizations, it's a communication issue. It's conflict, handling difficult conversations, giving and receiving feedback. But inevitably, it ends up boiling down to they have a workforce made up of different brains. And you'll have a manager who'll say, "Hey, Haroon, how did that job go?" Now, what they actually mean is, in 3 sentences, can you tell me what was the problem, what was the solution, and what we need to do next? But that's not what they said. So the individual will respond and go, "Well, so this job was one of my hardest jobs ever. What we had to do was," and then gives them half an hour of what they did to complete that job. Meanwhile, the manager's going crazy, going, "No, no, no, why are you still talking?" But that's because they didn't ask very clearly for 3 sentences. So that's what that TEDx is all about, the clarity of communication and changing your team culture so you actually do say, do you know what? I really love getting emails, but I really hate getting texts. Or I really love a WhatsApp message, never email me. We never say that to each other. We say, how'd you like your drink? Do you like tea, coffee? How'd you take it? But we don't, how'd you like to communicate?
Oh my God. You've just hit a raw nerve there because I generally don't like emails. My email inbox has got about 30,000 unread emails. And if I say to people who I'm working with, if you email me, please don't ask me how I am. I'm going to be fine when I read it. Don't be English about it. Don't ask me how I am, how things are going. I really don't want to talk about how things are going. You don't need to know at this moment in time. Number one. Number two, keep it short and sweet because my attention span is like literally, I'm competing with goldfish at the moment to see who can reduce the expert. So yeah, communication is absolutely essential. Yes, please go and listen to Sam's TEDx talk or go and watch it even better. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I have seen it, but I forgot it was a while back. Thank you ever so much, Sam Warner. I really look forward to collaborating with you because there is an amazing emergence of a new group of, I believe, superheroes because this world is a bloody mess. And I'll tell you what, the so-called typicals ain't fixing it. And they've got a different agenda, young people. They see past the BS, and we want to support them and help them thrive. Speak to you everyone soon, and make sure you share this podcast. Bye for now.